He hit me in the face with his open hand once, then again and again, counting under his breath like I was a chore, like I was a stain to be scrubbed from his life. By the time he reached 20, my left cheek had gone hot and numb, while his wife stared over the rim of her wine glass as if we were a show. If you've ever been pushed that far by your own blood, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. You may help another woman name what's happening to her. My name is Lorraine. I am 68 years old, a black woman from the west side of Atlanta, retired postal clerk who kept books on the side for hairdressers and corner stores, because numbers have a way of telling on people even when mouths stay pretty. I have a small spiral notebook where I've written everything that ever mattered in my house in neat lines. Pay stubs, utility meter readings, the exact date my husband pressed a brass wedding ring onto my finger in a church that smelled like lemon oil and starch. I keep that ring on a chain now, pressed flat under my collarbone when I need courage. Last Sunday, when my son raised his hand, I lifted my chin and let the metal cool my skin. He did not always have hands like that. When Darius was little, he would fold his palm into mine and match my pace on the way to the bus stop. He learned to count on my lap using the grocery receipts I saved in a rubber-banded bundle. He would point at the totals and say, "We did good this week, Mama." And I would ruffle his hair and say, "We did honest." Somewhere along the way, maybe the day he met Kyla with the laughing eyes and sharp tongue, maybe the day that app on his phone began telling him money could jump just by wishing, he forgot the smell of ink and paper and replaced it with the quick high of easy talk. "Be reasonable, Ma," he started saying. It became the phrase that showed up at the end of every argument like a period. Be reasonable when he missed paying the HOA and they sent a notice. Be reasonable when he asked for a loan at the end of the month and called it a bridge. Be reasonable when he borrowed my car for an afternoon and kept it 4 days. And then, be reasonable, Ma, when he decided I should sign a paper that would streamline things with his mortgage because the bank gets confused by older names. Older names. He meant mine. I am not a hothead. I have spent a lifetime alphabetizing invoices and making columns add up. I breathe through my nose and chew the inside of my cheek until the flare passes. But there are some words you don't say to your mother while your wife smirks behind you. Some words that turn the air in a kitchen into the thin, sharp air at the edge of a cliff. Sunday dinner had been pot roast and string beans, rice made fluffy with a clean dish towel over the pot. I set the table the way my mother taught me. Forks to the left, knives and spoons to the right, glass above the knife. When I did not sign the paper, he slid across my table with a pen already uncapped. He stood. "You make me do this," he said quietly, looking at his wife like a man asking permission to be who he really was. The first slap shocked me because it sounded like a dropped book. The second made my eyes water. By the fifth, I stopped counting because I could not believe this was my child. He counted anyway. When he reached 20, he took the pen back, picked up the paper, and said, "Now you'll sign tomorrow. Be reasonable." He left the pen on my table like a threat. When the door closed behind them, the house exhaled. I touched my cheek and felt the slow bloom of heat, the way a kettle announces itself before a whistle. I went to the bathroom, looked at the woman in the mirror, and lifted the chain from my collar. The ring lay in my palm, a thin circle, nicked where years had bitten it. I pressed it to the bruise until the metal went warm. Then I went to the drawer under the microwave, the one where I keep the spiral notebook, the pink carbon copy receipts, and a battered manila folder labeled with my own handwriting, Property Papers. I sat at the table, opened the notebook to a fresh page, and wrote at the top in block letters, Ledger of Hands. Then I wrote the date, the month spelled out, the day and year in words. Next line, 20 open-handed strikes by Darius M. in presence of spouse Kyla M. at my kitchen table, following refusal to sign streamlining mortgage paper. My pen did not shake. I added the time, just past 6 in the evening, because details are armor. I pulled the manila folder close and took inventory like I was balancing a register. Original warranty deed from 3 summers ago when that house was purchased in my name. Then quit-claimed 1 share to Darius for love and $1. Language I had copied from the lawyer because love felt like the kind of currency that could stretch. Deed of trust. Proof of funds for the down payment. Cashier's check stubs. Cashier's name I remembered because she wore violet nail polish. The memorandum of our private agreement that I had typed myself and notarized at Belinda's shipping store. The one that said any transfer, refinance, or encumbrance required both signatures. My signature. Mine. I ran my fingers over the notary's stamp and felt steadier. I took out my phone and snapped photos of the bruise on my cheek from 3 angles with the kitchen light and the hall light and the flash. I held the ring chain in the frame, so there was no mistaking whose skin it was. I uploaded them to a folder in the cloud I once made for recipes and labeled them, in plain words, in case any future person with a badge needed to understand without guessing. Evidence wants daylight. The kettle clicked off. I did not drink the tea. I opened my purse and emptied it on the table. Driver's license, Medicare card, the pink receipt from the last time I paid the property tax at the county office because I do not trust online portals. A set of keys labeled in my handwriting on masking tape. House, car, mailbox, and the spare to Darius's place that he gave me in a soft moment before he decided paper should erase women. I stared at that spare key. It had weight. I could hear Belinda's voice in my head. Belinda, who notarized my little agreements and sold stamps by the book when I asked, who told me in a whisper once that if a man ever laid hands on her, she would handle her business with documents, not screams. Queen, she likes to say, paper is slower than rage, but it never forgets. The bruise darkened. I wrote another line in the notebook. Call primary care for documentation of facial contusion. Ask for photographs to be placed in chart. New line. Call Detective Clay at Zone 1 Precinct to file report. Obtain case number. I wrote the words case number and underlined them because a case number is a skeleton for truth to hang on. Another line. Confirm title status at county records. Pull copy of deed. Verify restriction language. Another. Call Ms. Eaton at Crestline Realty. Inquire about listing procedure and what documents are required to accept an offer in trust or tenancy in common. On the third read through the paperwork, my hands stopped shaking. I remembered a winter afternoon sitting in a fluorescent-lit bank cubicle when the loan officer asked who would be on title, and I heard my own voice say, "Put it in my name. My son is young, and young men fall in love with new ideas." I had smiled when I said it, to soften it. The woman at the desk smiled back and clicked her mouse. I did not know then that my own future self had just sent a message back to me, tucked inside a line of type at the county clerk's office. I put the brass ring back on its chain and tucked it under my blouse. I closed the folder and laid the pen Darius left across the top like a broken bridge. I cleaned the kitchen because you cannot think in a mess. I wrapped the pot roast for tomorrow's lunch. I wiped the table twice. Then I sat again with the notebook and wrote the sentence that turned my chest from fear to something else. I will not sign away my name. If you've been through something like this, if somebody who should protect you has tried to erase you with charm and paper, tell me so in the comments. Somebody may need your witness as much as I needed my own tonight. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Remember to be reasonable. The phrase that had lived in my house for years, suddenly in black letters. My jaw tightened. I breathed. I wrote one more line. Change locks tomorrow. Keep spare at Belinda's. Then I stood, slipped the spare key to Darius's house onto my ring, and picked up the manila folder. At 8 in the morning, the county records office opens, and Ms. Eaton starts returning calls by 9. I intend to arrive with coffee breath and a straight spine, my bruise like a stamp of truth, my papers neat, my voice steady, and the very first thing I will do is ask for a certified copy of the deed in my name. The next morning I woke before the sun and pressed the brass ring against my cheek, the way a nurse once told me people settle themselves before hard days by touching what they love. I made coffee I did not drink, tucked the manila folder into my purse, and took the first bus downtown. The county records office smelled like toner and patience. A clerk with a lilac scarf asked my name and slid a form across the counter. I wrote slowly, printing my letters as if neatness could thicken the ground under my feet. When she returned with the certified copy, I read the type 3 times. Owner of record, Lorraine M. The old warranty deed showed only my name. The quitclaim I had once signed in a soft season, the one for love and $1, had never been recorded. Somewhere between my kitchen table and the clerk's vaults, it had gone missing, maybe filed in a junk drawer behind novelty bottle openers, maybe folded into a book someone never finished. Paper that never reaches the courthouse is a secret that cannot boss you. I paid for 2 stamped copies in cash because paper you can touch has more weight than a password. Outside, the air was bright, like a peeled apple. I sat on a bench and opened my spiral notebook to the page I had titled Ledger of Hands. Beneath yesterday's entries, I wrote, Confirmed title sole, quitclaim unrecorded, deed remains in my name. I underlined the word remains until the ink swelled. At 9, I called Miss Eaton at Crestline Realty. Her voice had the steady rhythm of a person who knows which form goes where. I told her I needed to understand listing requirements. 1 owner, clear title, proof of identity, and your signature on an exclusive agreement, she said. Also any tenant disclosures. I could hear the tap of her keyboard. Is the property occupied? I swallowed. Yes, I said, by my son. There was a small silence. Then we follow the noticed path. We do not need permission to sell if you are the owner, but we do need to give proper notice and respect the law. I will not have you hurt. Her voice turned soft on that last word in a way that made me feel seen. While I waited for her email, I opened the notebook and began what I do best. I made columns. On the left, I wrote months, not numbers, names with teeth, January, February, March. In the next column, I wrote the phrase that had been haunting my house, be reasonable. In the third, I wrote the amounts I could remember, every bridge, every emergency, every mama, just until Friday. 200 for new tires, 140 for the light bill he swore had been misapplied. $800 for a business idea that turned out to be boxes of nutritional shakes sitting dusty in his garage. 1 month, I covered the entire mortgage when he told me his paycheck was caught in processing. Another month, I paid the Homeowners Association to stop a lien letter from hardening into a bruise on his credit. I wrote the totals in words because the brain reads words like a story, and I needed to hear mine. I flipped back through older pages and found a note from 2 summers ago when Kyla arrived in heels that did not seem built for walking, laughing at jokes I did not recall telling. I had written in small slanted letters, "She speaks like a commercial. Quick promises, the word upgrade in every other sentence." That was the month Darius began inviting himself into my decisions. He insisted I stop clipping coupons because it looks poor. He asked for my online banking password in case of emergencies. He changed my phone plan, called it a family bundle, then added a tablet to my line. The tablet arrived in a smiling box with colorful confetti printed inside. I found the invoice and wrote the total in the notebook anyway. Money is not confetti, it is hours of your spine. At the doctor's office, I asked the nurse to take photographs of the bruise and place them in my chart with the words, "Assault by adult son." I watched her type it, letter by letter, the way a person might stitch a wound. She looked up at me with eyes as gentle as clean sheets. "Do you feel safe going home?" she asked. I told her I was not going home. I was going to handle my business. She printed a visit summary with the diagnostic words spelled out like a verdict. I slid the paper into the manila folder behind the deed. On the bus again, I studied the timeline in my notebook and saw how the trouble had not come as a wave, but as a tide, inch by inch. The first "Be Reasonable" had arrived after a missed car insurance payment, just a small thing. Then a credit card jointly opened for the rewards, which I declined, and then somehow found my name attached to anyway. I called the bank and removed myself. I wrote the date, time, and representative's name in my notebook as if those syllables could testify. When I refused later to co-sign a refinance, the phrase "be reasonable" curled around the room like steam, filling every corner, making it hard to see. It is the kind of phrase that makes you doubt your own posture, as if standing up straight is rudeness. Ms. Eaton's email landed with a soft chime, an exclusive right-to-sell agreement, a lead disclosure, a seller's net sheet projected at 3 price points. She had tucked a checklist at the top. Send copy of deed, photo ID, and any notices served. I forwarded the deed and my driver's license after covering the license number with a digital rectangle, because you can be prudent even with helpers. She replied within minutes and suggested a locksmith she trusts, who documents every change with time-stamped photos and a signed work order. "When the time comes," she wrote, "we do not need drama, we need sequence." Sequence. That word was a balm. I wrote a new heading in the notebook, sequence. Under it, I numbered steps with words. 1. Deliver a formal notice to vacate that complies with our state law for month-to-month occupancy. 2. Change locks only as permitted after notice, or if safety requires an immediate action supported by a police report number. 3. Secure valuables and important documents in a bank-safe deposit box. 4. List property with professional photographs and show by appointment only. Do not engage in hallway arguments. 5. Keep all communications in writing, even if they start on the phone. Send a follow-up email that begins, "Per our conversation at." 6. Do not break my own rules just to stop the noise. I took a second bus to the bank, opened a small safe deposit box, and slid in duplicates of everything: deed copies the doctors print out, the photos of my cheek, and the pink receipts that looked flimsy until you stacked them. The bank manager asked if I wanted to add an authorized user. "Not today," I said, and watched the words land like a cleanly set plate. On my way out, I purchased a cashier's check for the balance due on the last property tax installment because I wanted no sheriff with a piece of paper mistaking my fight for neglect. At Belinda's shipping store, the bell on the door jingled a little hymn. Belinda looked at me, then at the bruise. Her eyes went flinty and kind all at once. "Queen?" she asked. I nodded. She pulled out a notary stamp and a legal-size sheet. Together we drafted a notice on plain white paper using the statute she keeps tucked in a folder behind the counter. We wrote the date in words, the property address, and the reason: termination of permissive occupancy due to safety concerns and repeated non-payment of agreed costs. We added a line stating that all future communications must be in writing. I signed, she notarized, and I slid the original into a bright envelope as if color could carry courage. Back home, I walked through the house the way a firefighter sweeps a room. I videotaped every space with the day's newspaper in the first frame, so no one could claim I planted what I found later. In Darius's office, I saw a whiteboard covered with goals written in thick marker: new car, bigger house, some brand of watch I cannot pronounce, and in the corner, in smaller letters, the phrase "be reasonable," underlined twice. I stood very still in that doorway, the brass ring warm against my collarbone, and asked the air who he had become. On his desk, I found a manila envelope labeled "Streamline Packet." Inside were forms printed off the internet, pre-filled with my full name. The signature lines were empty. I photographed every page. I wrote another line in my notebook: "Intent was present before dinner." Just before dusk, my phone buzzed with a message from Kyla. "We can forget last night if you sign tomorrow. Let's be reasonable." The words slid over me like oil. I could feel how they were meant to make everything slippery, to make me drop what I was holding. I typed back a simple sentence: "All communications in writing to my address. Please do not text." Then I printed the notice, slid it into a clear sleeve with the day's mail, and placed it on the hall table where a person leaving for work would see it. I did not tape it to the door. I do not shame in public if I can help it. In the quiet that followed, I opened the seller's net sheet and took a pen to the numbers, turning them into words on my page. The projected price at the low end, minus the agent's commission, minus transfer tax, minus a small allowance for repairs. The remainder, the part that would reach my account, was enough to buy me a modest place and a porch with a chair that did not wobble. I did not feel triumphant. I felt sober. I felt like a person who had stepped out of a river she had been standing in for years and was noticing her own feet again. I placed the spare key to Darius's house, my house on paper, on the table beside the clear sleeve. I touched the brass ring and whispered my husband's name. Then I returned to the notebook and wrote the sentence that would turn all this arithmetic into motion. Tomorrow I will sign the exclusive right to sell agreement in my name alone. And the moment I put down the pen, the front camera app flashed a live view of my son's face filling the screen. When I saw his face appear on the phone screen, my body froze. He wasn't calling. It was the security camera I'd installed years ago above my porch, before he moved in, Before I forgot, I'd set the alerts to push live footage straight to my phone. Darius was standing there, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other holding his key. He hadn't even knocked yet. I could see the look, that restless mix of guilt and anger that boys wear when they think they're still in charge. I locked the door and waited. A minute later came the knock. Then another, harder. "Ma," he called, voice tight. "Open up. We need to talk." His talks always came after trouble. I slipped my phone into my apron pocket and hit record before answering. I opened the door just a crack. "You got my message?" I asked. He nodded, eyes narrow. "You can't just evict family." "I can when family puts their hands on me," I said, steady. "You'll find a notice on the hall table. Read it." He stepped forward, but I blocked the frame. For a moment, the boy I raised flickered in his eyes, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and math tests. Then the flicker went out. "I don't know who's been filling your head with this legal nonsense," he said, "but I'll fix it. You'll see." "You're right about one thing," I said. "You will see." He turned, muttering something about ungrateful old woman, and left. I waited until his car engine faded before I let myself breathe. Then I pressed save on the recording and uploaded it to the same cloud folder where the bruise photos lived. That afternoon, I met Ms. Eaton in her office. She was younger than I expected, late 40s maybe, with nails shaped like almonds, and a calm that comes from having seen every kind of mess money can make. She read through the paperwork, asked a few careful questions, and nodded. "You're clean on title," she said. "You're the legal owner. If anyone contests it, they'll have to show a recorded deed or a court order. You have neither against you." I signed the exclusive listing agreement right there, my name alone filling the owner's line. When the pen lifted, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Air moving freely in my chest. "I'll schedule photographs next week," she said. "Discretion guaranteed." I smiled. "Make sure to catch the kitchen window. The light's good around 10. She tilted her head. "You sure you're ready for the fallout?" "I've been ready since he counted to 20, I said. On my way home, I stopped by Belinda's. She notarized a sworn statement about the assault, the date, the time, the witnesses, my refusal to sign the paper. "Just in case," she said, handing me the stamp copy. I placed it in the manila folder behind the doctor's report. That night, the house was too quiet. Every tick of the kitchen clock sounded like a dare. Around 9, my phone buzzed. A message from Kyla this time. "Darius says you're confused. We're family. Don't make this ugly. Be reasonable." The phrase again. Always that phrase. It used to sound soft, persuasive. Now it felt like a leash. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and drew a line across the page. Above it, I wrote them. Below it, me. On their side, I listed every word they had ever used to twist me. Reasonable, dramatic, selfish, forgetful. On mine, I wrote owner, mother, witness, survivor. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling the porch. I peeked through the blinds and saw movement by the mailbox. A shape bent down, then straightened. The security light flared, catching Darius's shoulders for half a second before he stepped away. I watched him leave an envelope wedged between the slats of the door. I waited until his car's headlights vanished before opening it. Inside was a letter, typed, no signature. "Mother, I am willing to forgive your behavior, but if you proceed with any sale, you'll regret it. Think of your grandchildren. Be reasonable." There it was again. The curse dressed as kindness. I slipped the letter into the notebook and wrote, "Threat received, dated and timed." I took a photograph of the envelope before locking it in the safe deposit box first thing the next morning. At the police precinct, Detective Clay listened without blinking. He was tall, with the patient air of a man who'd heard too many families tear at each other. He took notes, then asked to copy my photographs and videos. "You're doing everything right, Miss M," he said. "Keep documenting, don't engage. If they show up again, call us first." When I stepped out of the station, the air smelled of rain and cut grass. That scent that makes you believe the world still resets itself overnight. I called Miss Eaton from the sidewalk. "Schedule the locksmith," I said, "tomorrow morning." By noon the next day, a gray van pulled into the driveway. A quiet man named Roberto changed both locks while his assistant filmed the entire process for documentation. I paid in cash and got a receipt signed with date and time, proof that the new keys were in my control, not stolen or swapped. At 2 p.m, Miss Eaton called. "The photographer's ready. We can have the listing up by Friday." "Friday's fine," I said. "I'll be out of town by then." Truth was, I had already packed a small suitcase, just clothes, the notebook, and the brass ring. I booked a week's stay at a friend's place in Decatur, an old church secretary who owed me nothing but kindness. I didn't plan to hide. I planned to breathe without looking over my shoulder, but Darius didn't plan to let me. That evening, as I loaded the suitcase into the cab, my phone buzzed again. An email this time from an address that looked half random, half familiar. Subject line, "Mom, you'll regret this." The message read, "Don't go to the police again. Don't touch my house. You're not thinking straight. Be reasonable." The words pulsed on the screen, each one echoing louder than the next. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm done being reasonable." I deleted nothing. I printed the email at Belinda's the next morning and slid it behind the threat letter in my folder. And that's when Miss Eaton called with a voice sharper than usual. "Lorraine, I just got an inquiry through our listing portal. Someone pretending to be you, asking to withdraw the sale. They sent a scanned ID." I felt my throat tighten. Was it my license? "It looked like it," she said, "except the photo's newer and the signature's off." I knew then. My son had taken a step too far. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was forging me. I stood in the quiet of Belinda's store, the brass ring cold against my chest, and made a vow in my head. I will not let my child erase me with ink. Then I opened my notebook, turned to a fresh page, and wrote at the top, "Report of forgery." That was the moment I decided to go beyond documentation, to fight back with the same precision he used to hurt me. And when I stepped out into the daylight, I saw Darius's car parked across the street, engine idling, his eyes fixed on me through the windshield. He sat in that car like a shadow with a heartbeat. The afternoon heat wavered over the hood, but Darius didn't move. His window stayed half rolled down, one elbow hanging out like it used to when he was 17 and too proud to come inside after an argument. Except this time, he wasn't sulking. He was studying me, measuring what I'd become. I felt the old instinct to shrink, to keep the peace. But instead, I stood still on the curb and looked straight at him, just long enough for him to know the silence was mine to break. Then I turned and walked back inside Belinda's store. Behind me, I heard the car door open, then slam. "Ma!" his voice cracked through the parking lot. "We can fix this." Belinda's eyes flicked up from her counter. She didn't move, just crossed her arms like a guard. I turned back to him through the glass door. "Fix what?" I asked. "The bruises? The threats? The forged ID?" He froze, mouth parting. "You don't know what you're talking about." I stepped closer to the glass. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." He looked at Belinda, then at me, then lowered his voice to something that was almost pleading. "Ma, don't do this. Just sign the papers and this all goes away. Be reasonable." There it was again, the phrase that had followed me for years like a bell. Only now it sounded hollow, like a command that no longer knew its master. I said nothing. I just reached into my purse and lifted the manila folder high enough for him to see the edge of the police report peeking out. His face drained. He turned and walked fast to the car. I waited until he was gone before my knees started to shake. Belinda locked the door behind him and put her hand on my arm. "You ready to file that forgery report, Queen?" "Yes," I said. "Let's start now." We faxed every document straight to Detective Clay. The fake withdrawal email, the counterfeit ID, the typed threat. Belinda added her own notarized statement that I had been in her shop at the time the forged request was sent. Within an hour, Clay called me back. "We'll open an identity theft file," he said. "This crosses the line into felony territory." When I hung up, my hand stopped trembling. There is a kind of calm that only comes when fear has no room left to grow. I spent the next hour updating my notebook. A new section, Defense. Under it, I listed every agency I had contacted and every file number. Next to each, I left space for results. Then, under that, I wrote one sentence in heavy ink: "I am my own witness." The following morning, Miss Eaton texted, "We have an offer." I blinked at the screen. It had been less than 48 hours since the listing went live. The buyer was an older couple relocating from Savannah. Cash purchase, full asking price, quick close. "I'll prepare the counter and send it for your signature," she said. But as soon as I hung up, my phone rang again. Private number. I almost didn't answer. Then something inside me whispered, "Let them speak." It was Kyla. Her tone had shifted. All the gloss was gone. "Lorraine," she said, voice brittle, "you're going to destroy your own son. Do you understand that?" "My son did that himself," I said. "He's scared," she snapped. "You're making everything worse. He was just trying to consolidate the loan." "By hitting me 20 times? Silence. Then quietly, "You provoked him." I let out a breath that felt like a lifetime. "You were there, Kyla. You watched." Her voice sharpened. "He said you're confused. He said you're writing things that didn't happen." "Then let the papers tell the story," I said. That night, I received an email from an unfamiliar law firm. The subject line read, "Notice of intent to contest ownership." The body was short and vicious. Darius's attorney claimed I had gifted the property years ago and was attempting to unjustly liquidate family assets. Attached was a scanned copy of the forged quitclaim deed, this time stamped. Badly photoshopped, but enough to rattle anyone who didn't know the difference. I forwarded it to Detective Clay and Miss Eaton. Within the hour, Clay called. "Don't worry, Miss M," he said. "That's a forged record. I checked the county's database. Still only your deed on file. But this confirms intent to defraud. Keep that email." I hung up and stared at the ceiling until the clock read 3. Somewhere between the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own breath, I realized the war had moved from paper to psychology. Darius wanted to exhaust me, to make me doubt the point of fighting. He didn't know that doubt had already burned out of me like fever. The next morning, Miss Eaton called again, her tone crisp. "The buyers increased their earnest deposit. They're serious. We can close in 10 business days if the title's clear." "The title is clear," I said, "but Darius will not stop." "I'll add a seller affidavit to your file," she replied. "You'll sign it in front of the title officer. That will close any door he tries to open." The day of the signing, I wore my navy suit from my old postal retirement ceremony, the one with the gold buttons that made me feel official. The brass ring hung inside my blouse, cool against my skin. At the title office, the notary read the affidavit aloud. "I, Lorraine M., declare that I am the sole legal owner and in possession of the property located at—" My pen didn't hesitate. Signature smooth, deliberate, final. As we left, Miss Eaton handed me the folder of executed documents and smiled. "Congratulations," she said softly. "You've done everything right." Outside, the air was thick with August heat. I took one deep breath and felt something shift in my ribs. Relief trying to find a place to live. Then my phone vibrated again. A text from an unknown number. "Check your porch." My heart thudded. I opened the app linked to my security camera. The feed blinked on, and there it was. A single cardboard box sitting right at my front door. No return label. I called Detective Clay immediately. "Stay where you are," he said. "Don't touch it." When the patrol car arrived 20 minutes later, the officers used gloves to open the box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was my spiral notebook, the same one I'd kept hidden in my locked desk drawer. On the first page, my writing had been smeared with something dark. Coffee, maybe. And across it, in thick marker, someone had written, "Be reasonable." I stared at the words until the letters blurred. Then I looked at the officer. "You see," I said quietly, "he wants to erase the record." He nodded and bagged the notebook as evidence. That night, I sat at my table with a new spiral, same size, same lined pages, and wrote on the cover, "Ledger of Hands, Copy 2. Then I opened to the first page and in my neatest handwriting began to rewrite every line I remembered, every date, every bruise, every receipt. The act felt sacred, like rebuilding a burned church. When I finished the last line, I closed the notebook and whispered, "Paper never forgets." My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message, it was a call. From Detective Clay. "We traced the forgery," he said. "The document was uploaded from your son's work computer. We'll be serving a warrant by morning." I pressed the brass ring against my chest. The metal felt almost hot. "Thank you," I whispered. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you should be somewhere safe tonight, just until we make contact." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I will." I packed my suitcase again, the notebook, the folder, the ring. Before leaving, I looked once around the kitchen, at the clock, the clean table, the place where the bruise had first bloomed, and as I reached for the light switch, headlights swept across the window, stopping right in front of the house. A familiar car door opened, a familiar voice called out, "Ma, please, open the door. Let's talk." His voice cut through the dark like a hymn sung out of tune. I didn't move. The clock above the stove blinked midnight, casting soft red light across the counters. The brass ring against my chest felt heavier than ever. A small, steady anchor keeping me from floating into panic. He knocked once, twice, then harder. "Ma, I know you're in there. Just listen to me." I took a slow breath and stepped back from the door. I'd already sent a message to Detective Clay when I saw his headlights on the street camera feed. I knew they were coming. Still, hearing my son's voice tremble outside my door, it pierced through every wall I had built these past weeks. "Please," he said. "You don't understand what they're going to do to me. I never meant for it to go that far." I almost answered. Almost. But instead, I said quietly to the empty kitchen, "You meant it every single time you said be reasonable." The pounding grew louder. Then the blue lights flashed across the window. Tires crunched gravel. A shout followed. "Police!" And then the chaos unspooled in a blur. I watched from behind the curtain as they pulled him back from the porch, his hands out, words tumbling from his mouth that I couldn't hear. His head turned toward my window, eyes searching. For a split second, our gazes met, mother and son, one inside, one outside. He looked smaller than I remembered. The officers cuffed him gently but firmly. When the lights faded and the night returned to stillness, I sank into the kitchen chair. My hands trembled so badly I had to steady the coffee mug just to keep it upright. I whispered, "Lord, I didn't want it this way." The next morning, I met Detective Clay at the precinct. He greeted me in that quiet, respectful way of his, not the kind you use with a victim, but with a witness who helped build her own case. "We recovered the forged files," he said, sliding a printout across the desk. He altered timestamps, doctored scans. The DA's office will likely add fraud and identity theft to the assault charge. My eyes blurred for a second, but I nodded. "He'll get a lawyer?" "Public defender for now," Clay said. "But they'll reach out for a statement from you soon. You're doing everything right, Ms. M." He paused, then added softly, "You should know. The wife's cooperating." I blinked. "Kyla?" He nodded. Turns out he'd forged her name on a few things too. She's scared, but willing to testify. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. Not joy, not vindication, just the lightness of knowing the truth had witnesses other than me. That afternoon, I went back to Ms. Eaton's office to finalize the closing documents. The buyers were waiting in a conference room, a kind couple, retired school teachers from Savannah. They smiled politely when we met, unaware of the storm that had raged around those papers. I signed each page carefully, as though each stroke of the pen could rewrite my history. Eaton handed me the final settlement statement. "Transfer will post by Monday," she said. "Funds wired directly to your account." I nodded. "After that, I want the listing removed. I don't want another word said about that address." As I left her office, I passed the county courthouse. Tall, gray, humming with air conditioning and murmured lives. I walked inside. At the clerk's counter, I requested a certified copy of the restraining order that Clay's team had filed overnight. When the clerk slid the paper toward me, I read every word twice. My son's name, my address, the date, the seal. I folded it once and placed it behind the brass ring in my purse, close to my heart. That evening, I sat on the porch of my friend's house in Decatur, watching the sky dim to lavender. I opened my fresh notebook, Ledger of Hands, Copy 2, and began a new section, Witnesses. I listed them one by one: Belinda, notary and friend; Ms. Eaton, realtor; Detective Clay, officer of record; Dr. Henderson, medical documentation; Kyla M., eyewitness and corroborating victim. Under the heading, I wrote in bold letters, The ledger speaks. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone rang again. The caller ID said Fulton County Jail. I hesitated. Then I pressed accept. Ma. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, like a boy again. Ma, I messed up. I didn't think you'd go this far. I stayed silent. I just needed time, he said. The business went bad. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could refinance, I could fix everything. Kyla kept pushing and I panicked. He broke off, breath hitching. I'm sorry I hit you. I don't even know why I did it. I closed my eyes. You counted, Darius, I said softly. That's why. He went quiet. After a moment, he whispered, They said you sold the house. I did. More silence. Then, in a trembling voice, You really hate me that much? I took a deep breath, steadying the words before they came out. I don't hate you, son. I just stopped letting you hurt me. He didn't respond. The line clicked dead. I sat there under the purple sky, letting the silence settle. Then I wrote the last line of that section. He confessed remorse, but not ownership of his violence. The days that followed were a strange mix of peace and bureaucracy, signing forms, setting up a new bank account, transferring mail. Miss Eaton confirmed the wire hit my account exactly as planned. I bought a small cottage in Stone Mountain, 1-story, pale yellow walls, a yard just big enough for a chair and a gardenia bush. When I stepped inside for the first time, I whispered, Mine. And for the first time in years, the word didn't sound defensive. It sounded true. But before I could unpack, one last storm rolled through. A letter arrived. No return address, just typed words on plain paper. You got what you wanted. Congratulations. I hope it keeps you warm when you die alone. DM. No be reasonable this time. Just spite, stripped bare. I didn't cry. I placed the letter between the pages of Ledger of Hands, copy 2, under the section marked Evidence, and closed the book. Some people destroy their demons by burning them. I prefer to archive mine. Paper is patient. That night, I poured a small glass of wine and sat on my new porch. The moon hung low, swollen with summer heat. I thought about Darius as a child. The smell of baby lotion, the way he'd curl against me after nightmares. Somewhere between those small arms and these broken hands, something precious had been lost. I took a long sip and whispered, Lord, whatever you do with him now, let him find truth before pride buries him. Then my phone buzzed again, a call from Detective Clay. Ms. M., he said, his tone steady but urgent. The arraignment's tomorrow morning. I'd like you to attend. The DA wants your statement read in court. It'll carry weight. I looked out at the quiet street, the faint light glinting off the brass ring around my neck. Yes, I said. I'll be there. He paused. You sure you're ready? I smiled faintly. I've been ready since the first slap. The next morning, I dressed in my Navy suit again and walked into that courthouse with my head high. Kyla sat near the front, eyes downcast. Darius was led in, cuffed, thinner, his arrogance cracked around the edges. When the clerk asked if I wished to speak, I rose. My name is Lorraine M., I began, voice steady as a ledger line. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth. My son hurt me because he thought paperwork could hide it. But the truth leaves a trail. Receipts, stamps, bruises that fade but don't lie. And when someone tells you to be reasonable, sometimes it's just another way of saying, be silent. I will not be silent anymore. The courtroom was quiet when I sat down. Darius didn't look at me. As they called the next case, Detective Clay leaned over and whispered, "You did good, Miss M." But as I turned to leave, I felt the weight of everything. The years, the loss, the strange calm that comes after a storm too big for one heart to hold. I walked out of that courtroom into bright sunlight, clutching my folder of documents, the brass ring warm against my chest. And though I didn't know what verdict would come, I knew this: my story would end not in shame, but in freedom. Still, when I reached the courthouse steps, my phone buzzed once more. An unknown number, the message short and cold. "You think it's over?" The message stared up at me from the phone screen. 5 words, simple, venomous. "You think it's over?" I didn't flinch. I took a screenshot, time-stamped it, and saved it in the folder with everything else. By then, fear had become routine. Another line item in the ledger, another form of proof. Still, my heart beat harder than I wanted to admit. Detective Clay called later that evening. "We traced the number," he said. "Not from the jail. Someone used an app. Likely Darius's friend or someone acting for him. We'll file a no-contact violation, but you should stay cautious for a while." I thanked him and hung up, then went to the small porch of my new house. The air smelled like cut grass and rain. I listened to the crickets, to my own breathing, to the strange quiet that follows when a storm has taken everything except your will. The brass ring against my chest had grown warm from the day's heat. I touched it and whispered, "It's over for me," even if he doesn't know it yet. Over the next week, life took on the rhythm of healing. I planted gardenias along the fence, cooked myself breakfast without setting a place for ghosts, and began volunteering twice a week at the local senior center, teaching women how to track their expenses and store legal documents safely. "Paper is power," I told them. "Every signature is a heartbeat." Some nodded through tears. Others wrote my number on the backs of envelopes. The day of the sentencing arrived under a sky so clear it felt deliberate. I wore a soft gray dress this time, not armor, but grace. When I entered the courtroom, Darius sat beside his lawyer, thinner still, his wrists free, but his eyes bound by something far heavier. Kyla was there too, her hair pulled back, a tissue crumpled in one hand. The judge read through the charges: felony assault, forgery, attempted fraud, harassment. Then the words I had been waiting to hear for months: "Guilty as charged." Darius didn't speak when the judge offered him a chance. He just stared at the table. The sentence came: 2 years, with probation after 12 months served and mandatory counseling. I didn't cheer. I didn't weep. I simply felt a quiet exhale move through the room, like air returning to a space that had been sealed too long. When it was over, he finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, defiant and lost all at once. "You ruined my life," he said under his breath. I shook my head. "No, son," I said softly. "I stopped you from ruining mine." I walked out of that courtroom into sunlight so bright it hurt my eyes. Detective Clay waited outside, hat in hand. "It's done," he said. "He'll get help inside. Maybe that's something." "Maybe," I said, "but that part's not mine to fix." That evening, I poured myself a cup of tea and opened Ledger of Hands, copy 2. On the last page, I wrote a new heading: Verdict and Epilogue. Under it, I wrote in careful ink, "The house is sold. The money is clean. The bruise has faded. Justice was not loud. It was procedural, patient, and real. My son will face his own mirror. I have my peace." Then, for the first time since this all began, I added no date, because peace has no timestamp. I closed the notebook and placed it beside the brass ring on the table. Outside, the gardenia buds were opening in slow motion, their white petals soft and unapologetic. I sat in the doorway with the evening breeze brushing my cheek, the same cheek that once burned from his hand. I thought of the women I'd met at the senior center, the quiet ones with folders of unpaid bills and sons who borrowed too long, too often. I decided to start a small class there, the Ledger Circle, I would call it. We'd meet every Thursday, teach each other how to document truth, how to protect what's ours. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it wears reading glasses and carries a pen. Before bed, I opened my phone to check the cloud folder one last time. The bruised photos, the audio recording of his voice saying, "Be reasonable." The document stamped and signed. I hovered over the delete button, then let my thumb fall away. "No," I whispered. "Let the record live." The next morning, I woke to birdsong instead of alarms. I made coffee, cracked the window, and let sunlight flood the kitchen. My kitchen, no shadows left. The brass ring glimmered in the light, like it understood everything it had witnessed. If you're still listening, if someone out there ever told you to be reasonable while they chipped away at your name, your worth, your peace, hear me now. You are not unreasonable for wanting safety. You are not ungrateful for demanding respect. Paper your truth, sign your name, and never let anyone rewrite your story without your permission. My name is Lorraine M. I am 68 years old. I have my own roof, my own peace, my own ledger that tells no lies, and tonight, for the first time in years, I will sleep, not as someone's mother or victim or witness, but simply as a free woman,